let's go football first.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple new hires. We got to meet some of the band. Can you tell strategically, or give me your hypothesis on what you think Nebraska wants to do with their infrastructure, with a GM, and allowing Sean Padden to kind of be a strategist as the other smart guy, as they manage contracts on one side and bodies on the other? Like, how are you kind of picturing this thing in your head?
Yeah, I mean, Sean Padden's done everything over there.
Yeah.
And I think this probably frees him up to be more strategic with how he spends his time. I think more big picture stuff and kind of big picture, but also I think also the nitty gritty type stuff. I mean, when you're talking contracts and salary, are we calling it salary cap?
Yeah.
Like, is that a thing?
Like, yeah, that's what he's gonna do. He's gonna do contract stuff.
Yeah, I think
payroll. Like, what are we calling it?
Yeah, I think we have to.
Okay, so managing salary cap, that kind of stuff. I think that's a big job, and is going to get bigger. And I think having somebody also on the personnel side who has obviously, worked at a high level and worked for an organization that was very good at identifying talent and identifying overlooked talent. And I think that's the benefit is you kind of split those two roles and allow you to let Patrick Stewart go to work. And I thought yesterday, I think it was Phil Snow said it, but he talked about how Matt Rhule is always going to be looking for an edge.
Yeah.
And you look at what's happened in college football in the last couple months with the explosion, or maybe not explosion, but the importance placed on this general manager role. I mean, Jim Nagy goes from the Senior Bowl to Oklahoma. I mean, that's where things are moving. And, you need somebody that can kind of organize all of this stuff, because the teams that are going to be able to punch above their weight, I think, are the teams that are going to be more organized and be able to put together a roster in an efficient way. And that's not, it's a new thing to college athletics. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the kind of bounce back of NFL guys coming in and bringing that expertise.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because I always joke, for even as whatever the relationships is that, like, we're forming down in Lincoln and getting to know these guys. Sometimes you see too much. I'm like, gosh, he's just really, I don't know if hard on his staff is the word, but he's just demanding, right? And you got to earn your money, and he's hard on himself, and he's always constantly talking about like in-game stuff and guys needing to work harder and smarter. And you heard Coach Snow intimate it, right? He said Matt's always going to be on his guys, right? Like, that's just who Matt is if you work for him. When you look at the personalities, and this is on the heels of Phil Simpson saying, how did he say it? We have a good combination of coaches trying to prove themselves, guys that know they're like, you can tell he said when he answered that question, it was unnecessary to throw in the staff too. And right away, all I could think to myself is he must be really trying to establish how he wants this staff to approach this season mentally, as well as just the players. I could be reading too much into that, but it just didn't fit with the answer. But I loved the fact that it must be so ingrained. He just said it as part of the response.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that over there's an understanding that this is a really important year. Like, I've been not surprised, but you hear it enough from different people that they're very well aware of what the year 2 to 3 mile marker means for Matt Rhule and has meant in the past. And I think they've been pretty clear over there that the expectation is that that's going to occur at Nebraska as well. I mean, I think when you look at the moves that they've made, and certainly the coaching moves, I mean, you have overhauled all 3 of your coordinator spots. You behind the scenes, there's been a lot of additions and staff and some turnover there as well. There was some turnover the year before too, and I think that's just kind of the nature of how it's going to be. But yeah, I think that there is some internal pressure over there of like, we got to start to get this right. Like it felt like getting to a bowl game was an important step, but it's, the price of poker has gone up a little bit for everybody over there, and he's going to be demanding a little bit more. And I think everybody over there is kind of feeling that. I mean, I don't think that it's not out of bounds to say that he's very, very, very demanding of his staff. And you either you thrive under that or you don't. And, I think when you see a guy like Phil Simpson come back knowing what it's like, I think it helps to kind of have people like that back in the program that understand what the expectations are and what it takes to be able to function in Matt Rhule's system.
Bruntz, does it surprise you at all? And maybe it doesn't if you've heard Phil Snow talk very much about how pretty straightforward he is, but did it surprise you at all how kind of adamant he was that, him and Matt Rhule and Coach Rhule specifically have won everywhere, turned it around everywhere. It's a year 3 thing. And if Carolina had given him enough time, they would have won there too. Like we talked about that for a little while in his statement. Like, that caught me off guard a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was probably some confidence. I don't know. I mean, I can understand why he said it. I mean, they didn't get much time there. It was a really screwy time to be going into the NFL because you had everything with COVID going on. And he even mentioned, they didn't even meet a player in person for 6 months. I mean, how do you, like, the traditional timelines of, how a Matt Rhule type organization runs probably get pushed back a little bit when you're on Zoom with everybody and you're kind of trying to figure that out. I mean, would it have worked there? I don't know. I mean, I can't really speak that well to the challenges he had in Carolina. I mean, I think they were pretty significant. I think a lot of challenges that he faced were probably coming from the top down, just based on how that organization runs. But I don't know. I've gotten over the last couple of years, people that were there have kind of said the same thing, that it felt like, the plug got pulled too soon and that they were starting to trend in a positive direction when everything kind of blew up there. So I don't know. It didn't shock me. I guess I was the thing that surprised me again was just the emphasis on how big year 3, like they're not like arbitrarily setting the bar low over there for what this season, the expectation for this season is. And I guess that's noteworthy to me because you've heard it so many times already, and we're sitting here in late February.
It was interesting how he just went through, by he I mean Phil Snow was talking about like putting the roster, and he intimated what you just said. Not intimate, he said, they didn't get a lot of time to do it. And one of the things that caught my eye was, well, we had a small guy on one side. We wanted a big guy on the other. We ended up getting 2 small guys. So we had to play some 5-man front because we wanted to stop the run. It just was kind of a glimpse twofold. Number one, it was cool to hear, all right, we're not going to round peg square hole this deal. But you could clearly understand they weren't getting to choose what they wanted either. Right. I think ultimately was the undoing, just not being on the same page. But I did like the fact that, all right, if this is the hand we're dealt, then we're going to play it this way. Like, that was kind of my takeaway.
Well, and you take the next step with that. Like
in Reddick, we had to play some 5-man.
But if you move forward with that and for this year's roster at Nebraska, I mean, there's going to be similar challenges up front, right? Like you're replacing 2 very important defensive linemen. Are you going to be able to play a bunch of 3-man front with what you have there right now? do you have to play more 4 and 5? Like that's what's going to be interesting to me is you've got, a John Butler who's relatively still new as a coordinator, and you've got Phil Snow standing there, who's been Matt Rhule's longtime defensive coordinator, and I'm sure has a lot of ideas about kind of how to run things. And, how is that push and pull going to work when, you're going to have to find some answers in that front seven? I mean, I think they have bodies on that defensive line where they can mix and match. And I think they've got guys that have the potential to be serviceable pass rushers. But, I struggle to see how they're going to be able to line up and just run, a very similar defense to what they ran last season. Like there's going to have to be some adjustments there. And I think that willingness to fit it more to personnel, that probably helps you now with the way college football is too, where, season to season, you've got new guys are coming and going. I mean, you just cannot, the way things are now, you just cannot be so married to your system. And, it's you just have to have some flexibility there. So I guess kind of hearing that, I was kind of like, oh, okay, that makes a little bit more sense to me for what 2025 might look like.
Bruntz, I was thinking about, going back to kind of the GM conversation. I've kind of thought about this for a while. I know the NIL and transfer portal has sort of pushed this to the forefront, but in retrospect, is it surprising at all to you that this didn't happen sooner? Like the head coaching job at a major university has been like 8 different jobs for a long time. It feels like they should have sort of been separated out a long time ago.
Yeah, no, well, Nebraska kind of tried that, right? Like in 2016, 2017?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, with Kennedy?
No,
it's a kid. His guy that came from the Rams.
Devaney.
Vanny.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the time or the person to do it with, but I mean, I think that's I was thinking that when the news came down that they'd made that hire, I was like, oh, this is this sounds familiar, but I think with the way things are now, you need that role, and I wonder too in some ways if the dropping of the restrictions on the 10 assistants, if that kind of like paved the way for these types of hires where like you can have Phil Snow in the building and you don't need him out recruiting. Same with Dana Holgerson. I mean, it's much more of guys that have very focused, narrowed in type jobs. And then, the next logical step to that is, okay, well, in the support staff, where can we add guys that are going to help us or serve very specific functions within the organization. So I don't know if that's like a natural step, but I mean, I would be shocked if most Big Ten teams don't have somebody in this role by this time next year. I mean, it's you just have to do it because roster management and just kind of strategy for how you approach this kind of ever changing thing with the transfer portal and NIL. I mean, you just cannot afford to be left behind here.
Successful high schools or programs that I've been around or businesses in the private sector kind of have some common things, and starts with common language, number one. But Phil Simpson said some things yesterday, and Snow reiterated them, where there was this thing where they talk about, you heard Simpson say, something that may take me 10 minutes could take Snow, 30 seconds or whatever he said. And, Snow said, hey, make no mistake, this is John Butler's defense. Or, hey, part of a DC's role is he needs to be able to roam, so I want to do this. I love hearing guys talk openly about knowing their role and kind of staying in their lane in terms of what's expected. Because when your culture's already starting to form, which I think Nebraska's is, the more that your players or your employees or whomever can see that the infrastructure above looks like what they're asking for below, the better chance you have for success. Am I being a little too myopic, or are you vibing with kind of how they're trying to put this thing together top to bottom?
Yeah, and I think kind of going back to what I was saying earlier too, I mean, I think they're bringing people in with like very clear like expectations. Like we need you to do this. Like this is the role that we need you to fill. Like Phil Snow, I need you to help, coach on field, be there for strategy, help with special teams. Like I think that when you kind of have the expansion of the I mean, for lack of a better word, the bureaucracy over there. I mean, they've got a lot of people over there handling a lot of different roles. I think when you have that kind of help over there, you can kind of let people focus a little bit more on their kind of their area rather than kind of having to do everything. You know, I think that's the coaching stuff with having more, not having the limits of on-field assistance anymore. I mean, that's a huge help when you're bringing in these people that before would have had to recruit and coach and run a room and do all these different things. And now you just have so much more help and you're bringing in guys with, 30, 40 years of coaching experience. That's huge for, kind of making everything flow a little bit more easily within the organization. And, I think having guys like Dana Holgerson and Phil Snow around. I mean, John Butler's the same way. He's been, a veteran coach. I mean, that's a huge help for guys like Phil Simpson and Rob Dvorak and guys that are a little bit younger in their careers. And even, Phil Snow said this yesterday. He's like, I'm supposed to be around here helping these guys. I mean, that's another kind of piece of what he has to do. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, I think that they've done a good job over there of kind of identifying areas where they can bring people in and just add more. And you get a little bit more focused. It takes a little bit off the plates of other people. So, if the NCAA is going to let you do it, you may as well take advantage of it. And, obviously Matt Rhule's got a pretty a pretty well-rounded orbit of people that he can bring in that have a lot of experience and help out there.